welcome to another episode of Two Guys in a Chainsaw. I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
Well, Todd and I have kind of been taking turns going back and forth who gets to pick the movie each week, and Todd is a little bit more meticulous about it. He puts up polls on our Patreon and scans through our reviews, and I'm more of a just kind of whatever pops into my head kind of guy. And this week, the movie that popped into my head was 1988's Monkey Shines, directed by George Romero.
We've been talking about doing this for a while.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know what made me think about doing it now, but we have talked about it a couple times. It's come up in conversation, and honestly, it just popped into my mind, and I looked around to see if it was easily available, and it is. As of the recording of this episode, it is available to watch for free with ads on Tubi, and so I thought we'd give it a shot. And I think mainly the reason that I wanted to do it is because I have fond memories of it, but I couldn't really even pinpoint why. I couldn't remember why I liked it. I just remembered liking it, and it had been a really long time since I'd seen it, so I wanted to revisit it. Frankly, I didn't even realize that this was a Romero film.
Yeah, I forgot too. 100%.
Yeah, and it's, I think of Romero and I think of The Living Dead. But the truth is, he's done other stuff. In fact, this movie, it didn't remind me of, but it gave me shades. Didn't we do a movie of his about a vampire? Was it Martin or something like that? Was that Romero?
It was good too, and it was Romero, you're right.
It was good, and I think that it too was set in Pittsburgh. Isn't that where this movie is set?
Yeah, because I think he actually lives near there, so he tries to set his movies in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And like I said, the two movies are really not alike. This was Romero's second big studio film, second after Creepshow 2. And I think that it would be his last one for a while because he was a little bit disenchanted with the process. Not necessarily so much the making of the film, which it seems like he had a lot of freedom on, but the editing of the film. The studio kind of came in and did some cuts that he wasn't thrilled with, and so I think that after this he kind of went back to doing independent stuff. But this is an interesting movie because it does feel like it's got a budget. It didn't have a huge budget. I think like $7 million or something, which is more money than I'll ever see, but as far as film budgets are concerned, not enormous, but it looks good. It looks sharp and clean and pretty mainstream, and I don't know, I just going back and watching it again, I still really liked it, and I don't think that I'm in a minority necessarily, but for whatever reason it didn't do well at the box office, but I think that subsequently it kind of made a name for itself in the home video release, and there were some critics, not your favorite critic, but some critics who thought that it was actually kind of smart and interesting and tackled some interesting issues, and I agree. Plus, there's a really cute monkey in it.
We talked about this movie, I think, a little bit before because we did another movie that came out the same year that also involves a monkey.
Oh, please tell me.
Primal Rage. Remember?
Yes. Primal Rage. Which I was so reminded of in this movie.
Right?
Because eventually, main character gets the Primal Rage.
There's a lot actually between the two films that's surprisingly similar, but I guess it's because if you've devoted your time to making a movie about an experimental monkey that kind of influences or kind of makes things go awry, you're gonna have a lot of similarities. There's not a lot of different ways you can go. And I think even when we did Primal Rage, we talked about how there was around this time in the late 80s, this is 1988, Primal Rage came out at the same year. So, I mean, certainly they were made around the same time. I can't imagine. It's got to be a bit of a fluke. Like, I can't imagine there were spies from one set going over and trying to figure out what the others were doing, right? But I think, what was it, Project X, which is about experimental monkeys and gorillas who were enlisted by the military to fly planes into like suicide kamikaze type missions, and that starred Matthew Broderick, and it seemed like
sad movie.
Gorillas in the Mist, I think, was around this time. I mean, there was just a bit of a like resurgence of fascination with monkeys and experimental. It's easy to comment on nature and man. We kind of go to our evolutionary cousins, and talk about them, and who's the real primate, that kind of thing,
right?
And so it's ripe for that. And this movie delves into a little bit of that territory as well, like Primal Rage. Like Primal Rage, I felt quite a bit of sympathy for the monkey in this movie.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
I kind of fell in love with this little monkey too, and it adds a nice element to it. I mean, the monkey goes bad.
Right, but like I read some critics said this too. Like, you fall in love with the monkey, and even though the monkey ends up doing very bad things, ultimately the monkey is a victim too.
Yes.
And I think that I think that there's commentary here, as there is in Primal Rage and these other things, about when man tries to play God and the consequences of that, and that it really can be detrimental to all involved, in this case, including this cute little capuchin monkey.
Yeah. And you know what? I've got to say right off the bat, this movie was smarter than I remembered it being.
Yeah.
I think I watched it years after it came out, like on video or something in high school maybe. And I remembered being maybe even a little bored by the end of it. This time around, I was not bored, and I just saw layers and layers of subtext and really interesting things that Romero was doing with the story, with the characters, with the acting, and God, really great footage of that monkey. I mean, that monkey steals the show as an actor, and just, Romero does that. It's so crazy. From day one with Night of the Living Dead, most everything I've seen of his, he works hard. He's got an agenda almost every single time. He wants his art to say something. I think he makes these movies that you could call exploitation films that are gory and that, appeal to the horror crowd of like guts and blood and kind of crazy action and things like that. But beneath it all, and what sets it apart from a lot of his copycats at the time and since, is that he's actually saying stuff here. He has clear messages that are coming through, and I think quite skillful filmmaking. And, we talked about this with Martin, about how Martin is this like kind of this relatively deep character study of this sort of vampire type guy. And we were both really moved by it, and we're like, how has this movie kind of been so forgotten? It's just because it's like this 70s almost art house flick that you have to have the patience for sitting down and watching a character study type movie. I feel like this movie kind of rode the line. It does move a little slow, even though it's always moving forward. It never stops, I think, and just dwells in boring shit. But there are layers here that are fun to see and fun to unpack. And you're like, the movie also had these weird things that just had me guessing the entire time and trying to make sense of it, because it seems very straightforward, and then it takes a few weird turns, and then it almost seems to veer a little bit into the supernatural, and then it almost seems to kind of pop into a little bit of magical realism at some point. What I'm talking about specifically is there are moments in this movie where the monkey and the guy that he bonds with, the guy opens his mouth and is talking or is saying things, and he has monkey teeth. And I'm like, where's that coming from? Is he literally growing sort of canines up from both his jaw and the top of his head, but then it goes away. And I'm like, okay, okay. I mean, it's not literally happening. This is like an impressionistic thing that, I don't know, like how odd in this relatively mainstream, straightforward movie about a man and his monkey that you get these little things that make you kind of step up and go, wait a second, what's going on?
Well, and that particular detail is never addressed. Like,
never.
We see it and it happens multiple times, but
it's unavoidable.
Nobody talks about it. It's never mentioned. It just, we see it, it happens, but it's never mentioned.
Yeah, it's almost like sort of a like David Lynchian type thing, where he just throws in this thing that I don't think is meant to be taken literally. I'm not sure we're literally supposed to believe.
Well, except for one time he bites his lip and it bleeds. I mean, I guess anybody could bite their own lip and make it bleed, but like they make a point of showing that it's one of those canines or incisors or whatever it is.
True.
But it's also subtle enough that it had me questioning, like, are his teeth always like that?
Right. Like,
am I only noticing now because he's kind of snarling subtly? Like, I don't know. It was subtle but noticeable, and yeah, definitely interesting. And you talked about, how the monkey really is a major star of the movie. Definitely is. It's supposed to be a female monkey, but it was played primarily by a male monkey, which I guess is rare. As they talk about in the movie, male monkeys are typically more aggressive and territorial, and so
pee all over everything.
Right, to mark their territory. And so usually in filmmaking, and as is the case in this movie where they are training these monkeys to be service animals, which I guess is really a thing. I didn't know that. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, primates are intelligent. It makes sense. I think that, I don't know about capuchin monkeys. I mean, this one's dangerous, but I don't know how threatening they are in real life. But it was played primarily by one monkey. They also had several live monkey doubles. And then there were a few puppets, one of which was animatronic, that were designed by Tom Savini. Is one of the most famous effects coordinators and designers in the industry, still is.
Longtime collaborator with George Romero as well, yep.
Yeah. The monkey does look great, and I guess post-production on this took significantly longer than post-production usually took for Romero because he shot more footage than he had ever shot before because he wanted to make sure that he got all of the footage that he wanted to make, the monkey stuff look convincing, and it does.
It's super convincing.
Uh-huh.
This might be the best of the monkey movies I've ever seen.
But I think that it rides a really fine line too. There are moments when the monkey is scary and menacing, but seconds after it's kind of snarling, then you see it again, and it's so cute. Like, even though it's bad, you just kind of want to snuggle it, but it's adorable, and the jokes write themselves. I mean, it's the classic story of a love story between a man and his monkey, and then he starts to get a little bit too obsessed with his monkey, so he decides that he probably better settle down with his favorite monkey handler, but his monkey has other plans. So
yeah. I'm actually impressed
that it took me that long to get to the monkey jokes.
Are we going to talk about him petting the monkey? I mean, how far are we going to go with this? No, I'm really impressed with the fact that it gets off with male nudity, like right off the bat. I was like, wow, this is definitely a Romero picture, yet he's going mainstream and he doesn't even seem to know it. It jumps right into the action, which is perfect.
Well, there's a disclaimer first that, it basically just says, there really is this place that trains these monkeys, and
don't worry, this shit doesn't actually happen.
and we took the greatest of care and no monkeys were harmed, which I think it's important to put out there.
Yeah.
Right. One would assume, hopefully, that in a mainstream film like this, that there would be precautions taken because these are living animals. You got to be careful. So they there's a disclaimer. And then there's a really cool, it's so simple, but a really cool title sequence with just like these kind of reverse negative red images of the monkey's face, and then the title. Super, super simple, but I just thought it was really cool. And then, it jumps right in. The main character's name is Alan, played by a guy named Jason Beghe, B-E-G-H-E.
Mm-hmm.
He's done stuff, mostly television. He's still working in television. If you've ever seen a show that has the word Chicago in it, he's in it. But he's this really good-looking guy, super good-looking, and he's an athlete, and he wakes up in bed with his beautiful girlfriend, Linda, and then, he tells her he's going for a run, and then he stretches naked, and that was nice. Good-looking guy.
It is, and I was thinking, oh my God, like George, like he's just trying to like subvert, but actually it's kind of important. It's really important. They show this, his physique is nice. Yeah. I don't think it was a body double. He's got a nice physique. He's got muscles. This guy is an athlete, and he's won. He won medals in the Olympics or something, right? Something like that.
I don't know.
Marathons.
There's pictures and trophies
but it's his profession. It's like his livelihood is as an athlete doing these things. The first 3 minutes of the movie is establishing that fact quite well. Cool shots of him like stretching. He's nude and he's stretching and doing sit-ups and things. You see his muscles and stuff. So he puts things on. He starts jogging down the street, and the score is just this sweeping, beautiful Hollywood style orchestral score that's just setting you up for a nice drama, romance, whatever, as he's jogging down the road. I just thought that was it provides a great contrast to what's going to happen next. As he's jogging, suddenly he gets hit by a car.
He gets hit by a truck.
A truck. Yeah. Something startles him. I think there's a truck there. He gets whacked by a truck, and the score follows it. Just like it's like almost like that feeling, but a lot more sophisticated.
Balletic. He gets thrown up into the air in slow motion and does like a 360 turn in the air.
Yes,
it looks great.
It looks great, and it sounds great. Like, I was just blown away by the score at the very beginning. And he gets hit, and then we immediately see a very, very young Stanley Tucci, who is his doctor operating on his back. And it's just this scene of this guy laying down on the operating table, and they tape up his back, and it's close up, and Tucci is cutting into his back, and there's blood there. And I mean, he gets all the elements that you would expect from George Romero, like right from the beginning, There's a little bit of gross, cringy factor. There's a little bit of what you might call exploitative nudity, but it wasn't really. And a little bit of excitement, and it immediately sets up what's happened.
I thought that the opening, and it's minutes, it's, 3-4 minutes. But I just thought that it was really good characterization because it establishes the fact that this guy's life and personality is wrapped up in his physical body. And not to say necessarily that he's vain. I mean, he may be, but it's not so much that. But the things that we see of him are his amazing physique, the fact that, his livelihood potentially is in his physical prowess. There's the indication, of course, obviously, of sexuality with him getting out of bed with this beautiful woman. All of this, it seems like that is who he is. His person is very much defined by his body. And then 3-4 minutes in, that's entirely taken away from him. Entirely.
Yeah.
He is paralyzed from the neck down. This actor, of course, is an able-bodied person, but he plays a quadriplegic through the rest of the movie, which I was watching it thinking, what a challenge that is. Because in acting, so much is you have to take everything into consideration. Your voice, your face, but much of that for most of us is also our movement and our bodies. And to have to play a character and be denied the use of your entire body except for your face, that's a challenge. And I think that this guy, being an able-bodied person, steps up to that challenge pretty well. I mean, one could also argue all he has to do is sit still, but try to sit perfectly still for 10 minutes.
I was 100% thinking that, like, what a challenge it would be to not move a muscle, below your neck. Not a hand, a finger twitch, or anything like that. I mean, that had to be a challenge, a technical challenge for the acting, in and of itself. It's crazy. But he comes home from the hospital, and it blows past what we later kind of figure out is quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
Like, he's clearly been in physical therapy. He's been in the hospital for a while, because immediately when he comes back, we've zoned in on his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is distracted. She's upset. She and his mother are there. They're talking about this party that they're throwing for his return. They're preparing for it, but she is distraught. And as people show up to the party, the doctor comes in. They're waiting for him to make his big arrival. His name is Alan
Wiseman.
Yeah. Alan Wiseman and Linda. No, the doctor's name is John Wiseman.
Yeah.
The guy's name is Alan, and his girlfriend is Linda. And you immediately know. Again, I was really impressed that as soon as Stanley Tucci walks in the door, and Alan hasn't shown up yet, but the Dr. Wiseman has, Stanley Tucci.
Oh, John, this is Dr. Fry.
My name is Esther Fry.
Dr. Fry is one of Alan's professors at the law school. And we were just discussing...
Will Alan be able to finish his studies?
Physically, yes. The question is, will he want to?
Oh, let's not talk about this now. This is supposed to be a celebration.
Yeah. Some celebration, huh, Doc? Charlie Cunningham. I'm Alan's... I was Alan's coach.
He walks over to Linda, and he makes some eyes at her, and he looks at her, and they have a very brief exchange. But it's extremely clear within seconds that while Alan has been in his recovery, the Dr. Wiseman and Linda have had a relationship.
See, and I didn't pick up on that right away. I definitely picked up on the fact that she was out. Like, she was done. And Alan, as soon as she greets him and she's like, "Oh, I should have visited more," and he's like, "No, it's okay."
He bursts into tears.
Well, you can tell that he knows that she's on her way out.
Yeah.
But they have this kind of, coming home. Well, and I guess I should say, as terrible as that sounds, this is a life-changing thing. And this kind of thing, sadly, happens.
You can't judge.
She comes across as a bitch, and it seems like a real bitch move to leave him in this really dark moment in his life. But it's life-altering for her, too.
Yeah. Everybody suffers when things like this happen. I mean, you can't. I have some sympathy for her. I have a lot of sympathy for her. Now, the way it's painted in the movie, like you said, she comes across as a bitch, and the doctor, who we don't actually see too much of, he is confronted by Alan's friend Jeffrey later on, who we see. We'll talk about him in a second, but he gets confronted by him when he realizes that Linda and Dr. Wiseman have been having this relationship. He's extremely judgmental.
Well, I'll be damned. How do we diagnose this one, Wiseman? Clinical asshole syndrome? Clinical rat? Clinical snake in the grass syndrome?
Come on, Jeffrey.
And you clinical cunt.
I feel like the movie paints the doctor, too, as a bit of an opportunistic douchebag.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Again, is that fair? Who knows? We don't really have enough information to make a judgment, but...
Yeah, they even later in the movie paint him as being potentially careless.
True.
Again, we don't know. We're not medical professionals. It could have been a very simple mistake. As it turns out, I mean, I don't see any sense in not saying it now. As it turns out, Alan had a congenital issue that was potentially just triggered by this accident, and the initial Dr. Wiseman just assumed that it was the spinal fracture that had caused his paralysis, which is, I think, a fair
pretty
assumption.
Fair assumption, right?
Right.
I mean, they're looking at the X-rays. They're seeing that there's been a sort of severing or something of his spinal cord, or something right there at his neck. He's been in this accident, if he's never been X-rayed before, you're not going to know that you're just going to assume this accident caused it. So,
but he ends up seeing another doctor later who looks at it more closely and potentially finds this other issue. But again, yeah, I mean, I feel like they're kind of painting these two as kind of villainous, but that's also probably so that we don't feel terrible for them when they get killed later, because they do.
They do. Well, we quickly kind of get, like I said, Linda's very distracted and upset at the party. She's like hiding some things and all that. Like you said, Alan kind of understands that it's over. I don't think he knows at this point that she's with the doctor,
No.
but anyway, and they keep talking about Jeffrey. I can't remember. Linda calls for Jeffrey to come, and he says he's going to come, but he doesn't. And then we get introduced to his friend Jeffrey, who is a researcher at a lab at the local university. He instantly sets up a whole bunch of intrigue. I mean, the minute we meet him, he walks into his lab. He pulls out a syringe. He fills it up with this sinister red-looking liquid. He injects himself with it, and then he takes out what we learn is a frozen human brain, but it's like from a child or a baby or something.
It must be because it's really small.
And he talks. They use the typical stuff. Like when he's by himself, he either talks to himself or he talks into a tape recorder, so we kind of understand what's happening. But he shaves a little bit of it off. He boils it in something, and then he injects that green-looking liquid into this monkey. And so now we know Jeffrey is sort of the mad scientist of the movie, and he's Alan's friend. And he comes later to visit Alan at his home late at night after the party, after everybody's left. And Alan says to Jeffrey, I know that Linda, I can tell she's dumping me. I really like the fact of it sets up this reality of how life-changing this is for a person and the kinds of things that a sudden quadriplegic would have to go through. His mom is there, and she's there with clearly the best of intentions, but she's watching old home movies of him, and it seems to kind of bother him a little bit, because obviously he's quite able-bodied in these things, and they're kind of reminiscing about when he was a kid. And his mom very quickly comes across as overbearing, and once again, I still feel sympathy for her.
Absolutely. She's trying.
She's trying, but it's also clear, just like families are, that they have a history, And you can tell by later comments that he makes, especially in sort of the climax of the movie where he tells his mother off, and he's like, you've always been this way, You've always been self-centered and overbearing, and everything's about you, and blah, 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 blah. So early in the movie, she's trying, and you feel sympathy for her, and you think he's just sort of upset. But then it becomes later very clear that there are underlying tensions already here. And then at one point, again, we're kind of jumping around, but at one point, the mother ends up selling her house and moving in with him without even telling him.
That's later, right? Without even telling him, and that's a big deal. But
it is.
And the mother has also hired a personal nurse for him. Her name's Marianne. She's played by Christine Forrest, who was Romero's wife at the time and appeared.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
And who appeared in several of his movies, I believe. And she, unlike the mom, who you feel some sympathy for, because it seems like she really, she's a mother. She cares. She wants to help. Marianne the nurse is just kind of a witch from the beginning.
She's, you know what, I have to say, from the whole movie, Marianne the nurse, I felt was the most unbelievable aspect of this whole arrangement. Because
she's a healthcare provider.
Help. Yeah, and she's a total douchebag, and
she's there. She knows what the job is. She's caring for a quadriplegic. That is going to require a lot of attention, and she just acts like she's put out the whole time. Again. Yeah.
The long and short of it is, dude, she's hired help. If she is being such a bitch to you, and you're getting in all these arguments, you could fire her and bring somebody else in.
Yeah.
So this whole bit where this tension that they set up between her and him, that's my only real criticism of the movie, is that came across as really, really false. Yeah. They don't have any.
Oh, I agree.
It's not like she's his sister or anything. Like he has some sort of obligation to keep her around. No, he even says it later. Like, I'm paying you to help me, and you're being this way. Like, we'll just fire her and get another person in. Like, it's that easy.
That was bothersome. Even in 1988, there was technology of, amazing technology available for people who had physical disabilities, quadriplegics. He's got a very sophisticated chair that he can maneuver using a device with his mouth. And there are other things that he can do. And really, this technology, I'm sure, was not available to just your average Joe. But, like, he's got a whole kind of setup in his house where his lights are automated, his curtains are automated. All he has to do is, say certain commands and these things happen. But nonetheless, you see that this... I can't imagine how devastating it would be to go in one moment from being completely able-bodied to then having to completely rely on others for just your day-to-day stuff. And just seeing him being bathed in a sling, either by Marianne or his mother. At one point it's his mother, and he's like, "Mom, just let Marianne do this. It's humiliating." Now, should it be humiliating? No. It's not his fault that he needs this assistance, but my goodness, put yourself in that position. You're a grown man that has to be naked, which is as vulnerable as you can be, in front of your mom.
Yeah.
And having your mom, wash your body. And the mom says, "Oh, what, like, I've never seen you naked before?" Like, I get it. Like, yeah, you bathed my little wiener when I was a baby, but I don't necessarily want you doing that now.
Right.
So you feel how depressed he is, which culminates in a suicide attempt. He tries to kill himself, and Jeffrey saves him at the last minute. There's also a side story with Jeffrey's, nefarious boss, demanding results on his experience, and it's all very shady and stupid.
Well, it's
I say stupid, not
it is
kind
stupid,
of
though.
Whatever. I mean, it's like I feel like it's a commentary on the corruption of science for profit, and
it is,
I get it.
It's so shoehorned in there. And this guy, Dean Burbage or whatever, he's played by Stephen Root, and Stephen Root has been all over everything. He's got. You probably remember him most from Milton, right? The red swing line stapler guy from Office Space.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, the guy's got over 270 IMDb credits to his name. It's, insane. He's been all over television, movies. He's that guy that everybody kind of knows his face, but, nobody probably knows his name. And I felt like his character was really shoehorned in here. And this whole aspect of it was really shoehorned in. And it's a thread that just sort of gets dropped later, really.
Pretty much.
And
initially, I think that there was supposed to be more to it. There was an alternate ending that he was more involved in, but they ended up changing it.
If I'm not mistaken, I feel like I read somewhere that the original cut of the movie was 4 hours long, right? Something insane like that. So I'm sure there were a lot of threads that end up getting cut for time. And we've talked about this before. It's a trope, right? That universities are portrayed as these places where there are these intense rivalries between professors or renegade professors and the deans, who are coming in and doing stuff. The Fly 2, I think, was a lot like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this guy just comes across as this utterly sinister, dude who's just taunting Jeffrey, your research, when's it going to bear fruit? And, what are you doing? And money's running out and time's running out. And then I'm going to take over and I'm going to do something. And we never really understand what that it's going to be, but it's and I laugh at that because I used to work at a university, and you're heavily associated with the university. We know that this.
Oh, there's lots of camaraderie. I mean, I'm sure there's competition to some.
There is something, but no, it doesn't get to this degree. It doesn't get this ridiculous. But he gets almost it's a plot device.
Right, and I guess I'm not really even sure. I mean, I think that Jeffrey's motivated by wanting to help his friend. But I think that he's also motivated by kind of wanting to get his most promising work out of the lab. And so he takes this one monkey, number 6, that has been responding the best to the human brain serum. And he first goes to a woman named Melanie, played by Kate McNeil, who trains capuchin monkeys to be service animals. And he says, I've got this friend, he's quadriplegic, he was in an accident recently, this is new for him, he's not doing well.
So you train monkeys exclusively for quadriplegics?
Well, there's no time for anything else. The program's gotten so popular.
Well, as I told you on the phone, I have a friend who I think would be just a terrific candidate for this sort of thing.
There are a lot of candidates. That's the problem. All my monkeys are already assigned to homes.
Well, how about if I were to donate a monkey?
And she's like, well, okay. So she does, and Jeffrey takes the monkey to Alan, and Melanie comes along too, because she's going to work with them together, to get them acclimated to one another and train, for specific needs for him and in his house and whatnot. And Alan takes to the monkey right away, and he asks what her name is, and Melanie's like, well, her genus name is blah, 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 and it ends in Ella. And she's like, so I've been calling her Ella. So he names the monkey Ella. And then so we're probably like 25 minutes in now, and some critics criticize the movie for being too long, particularly in the first half. I disagree, because I really liked these next 20-25 minutes, where it's almost a cute little romantic comedy between Alan and the monkey.
It is. It's cute.
It's cute.
It is.
And the monkey is helping him, and they're sweet. Like, he likes the monkey, and the monkey likes him.
But look, it's just believable enough, right? Because this guy previously was in the depths of despair and tried to kill himself. Of course he's going to latch on to this animal that, it's a female, whatever, but it's showing him affection. He's able to show it. It does this thing where it climbs up on his chest and hugs him around the neck almost immediately, Mm-hmm. It's changing the batteries, and Melanie rigs up a whole bunch of cool stuff. And I liked this aspect of the movie too, because how often do we get to see quadriplegics, people who are disabled, being shown in a realistic and respectful way in film. And I feel that this movie does it. And it's interesting. You kind of put yourself in his shoes. Like, what would this life be like now if I was confined to a wheelchair? I couldn't wash myself. I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't move my legs. And then I had this monkey come in and help me out. And it goes through great detail, I think, in showing all the little ways that the monkey can help out.
Yeah.
Melanie rigs up his wheelchair to put some lights on it. And there's a battery there. And the monkey can change the battery. And she rigs up his chair to dispense sweets, or I think they're marshmallows, for the monkey whenever the monkey does something good. And so he's got this little dispenser on there. And then he has this device that's very 1980s, which is like it's a touch tone phone, but it has these cards, they're like punch cards, like old school punch cards, and a slot in it. And he uses a laser pointer to point around and point to a particular card, which the monkey then knows to grab that one, slide it in the slot and hit a button, and then it automatically dials. And he uses this laser pointer to tell the monkey to pick this up and to touch that or whatever. And I thought, oh my God, so interesting, The fact that the movie took the time to kind of get us into his head a little bit and bring us into his world, it made for me anyway, it made the relationship between him and his monkey much more believable, much more understandable. And, I just instantly got it, because I see what this guy's got to go through. And now he has a helper, and they have a bond.
Her abilities are a little far-fetched. I had to chuckle a little when the monkey was cleaning the house. like
wiping
washing
the windows. But I don't know. Maybe they do that. I don't know. I
don't know what they do.
It seemed very human, right?
And this is supposed to be a highly intelligent, not just again, primates are intelligent, but this is supposed to be an enhanced intelligence.
Because of what Jeffrey's been doing to it, yes.
So it doesn't have to be entirely realistic, but it's cute. And not only is it cute, but it kind of restores some of his confidence and purpose. and he decides he's going to go back to school, to finish up his studies and stuff. Then at some point, Jeffrey comes over, and he's still injecting Ella, and she doesn't like it, and she bites him. And then, all of this is really sweet. And there's also, you can tell that there's something beginning between Alan and Marianne, or Melanie too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not Marianne. Marianne's the nurse. It's very subtle at first. It's not immediate, but you can see where it's going.
I mean, it's a movie. You know it's going to go there anyway, right?
Right. Then Alan starts getting uncharacteristically agitated. And he has an argument with Marianne, and after the argument with Marianne's bird, she has this bird that he's never liked. He hasn't liked it from the beginning. He says he doesn't like birds in the house. He thinks they're gross.
She's like, too bad. I got a bird.
Yeah, she doesn't care.
Jesus, will you take it easy with that thing? If you're going to do a job, do it right.
I'm sick and tired of your insults, young man. I don't know what's gotten into you lately. Work my butt off around here.
Bullshit, this place is a pigsty. You don't change Ella's cage, you never fill her food dishes. This is our house. You have been hired to perform certain functions in it. And when you don't perform those functions, we get pissed off.
And just who is this we you're talking about?
Me and Ella.
After their little argument, the bird comes in and lands on his face and is like messing around on his face. And of course, he can't do anything. And
pecks at his eye. My God.
Yeah. And Ella's in her cage. And so I don't think at this point that she can do anything, but she's agitated too. And so then Alan tells Marianne when she comes in and gets the bird out, very angrily, he tells her to get rid of the bird or else. And then everybody goes to sleep, and we see Ella get out of her cage. At this point, she can let herself out of her cage, which, again, I thought was a little silly because this is this highly intelligent monkey, and it's just like a one latch thing. Like, she can easily just reach her arm out and pull this one latch to let herself out.
Yeah.
But she kills the bird and leaves it in Marianne's
bird slippers.
And this starts a whole thing where we start seeing Ella's point of view, and she's getting out of the house and running around outside, and Alan seems to not just sense, but almost be psychically experiencing it with her. And at first, he's just kind of confused. It's maybe he thinks he's dreaming or something, but that's when the mom comes back. He thinks at first just for a visit until Marianne screams at him. I just thought it was hilarious. I could have watched it on repeat like 5 times. You killed my bogey! And he looks at her and just sneers at fucking deserve to die.
He's becoming a jerk.
He's getting the primal rage.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we know about when monkeys and humans combine. We've had 2 movies now that show us that this is what happens, right? He's just becoming more agitated, more pissed off. But also, it gets weird. Like, it's weird that the movie went here. I guess the movie's based on a novel, and so these things usually play out better in novels. I thought the movie made an odd turn here, where I thought this was going to be, and this is what I remembered about the movie from having seen it before years ago. I thought the movie was quite a standard story about just sort of this super nice monkey that, things kind of just get out of control with his relationship with his handler. But the movie clearly is saying there is a sort of psychic connection between the monkey and Alan that develops.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I don't know, I was a little disappointed that aspect of it, but it's a movie. You go with it, right?
I think it would have been better if it were further developed. I don't know. How are they going to logically explain it?
You can't. Yeah.
They just, and I'm not saying that I doubt that something like that is possible, that through medication or whatever that psychic connections can be established. I'm not saying that I think that that's impossible. It just seems kind of improbable here, and it happens so quickly
Yeah.
And it's unexplained other than, oh, well, it must be a result of the medicine, I guess.
Injecting the medicine and all that. And then it gets a little crazy later when Jeffrey realizes this. And so he kind of goes to extremes and starts kind of experimenting with the other monkeys, like, can I make this happen again? Jeffrey comes over, and I like Jeffrey's character too because he's also complex. Like you said earlier, you get the sense he really cares for his friend. He's not like this, hey, I'm going to take advantage of this situation and like insert this rogue monkey in here and secretly perform these experiments. Like, no, he sought this woman out. He volunteered his monkey for it. He faked its death for the dean, so that he could get it out of his lab and in there so there would be no questions asked. But also, like you said, he's still a scientist and he wants to keep his research going. And so when he's over at Alan's place, he'll kind of sneak away and inject the monkey. And Jeffrey goes over and investigates because Alan says to him, he says, I'm having these weird monkey cam premonitions, these weird dreams. And so Jeffrey goes up to the attic, he investigates, he finds a broken screen, and he's talking to himself. He's like, oh, there you sneaky Ella, you're getting out after all. Alan is right. But he goes downstairs and he lies to Alan about it.
I didn't really understand that. The only reason that I could imagine why he doesn't tell him the truth is because both Alan and Melanie were really adamant about the fact that they didn't want like a lab monkey that had been tested on.
Yes, because he lied.
Yeah, he lied.
He told everybody. He told Melanie, he told Alan, he told all these people that this monkey has had nothing weird done to it. He specifically said that, so he outright lied to them about that. But he's not a terrible person.
No, he has good intentions in terms of what he's trying to do for his friend. Does it potentially benefit him too? Yeah, but, he is trying to help out his friend. This comes to a head when Alan finds out that his ex, Linda, is sleeping with the doctor. And that's also after he and Melanie, because Alan his finger moves and he sees it. So Melanie takes him to the doctor. That's when this new doctor tells him about this congenital thing. Alan gets really mad. He's like, so you're saying that Wiseman, if he had seen this, he could have maybe prevented me being paralyzed? And the doctor's like, well, maybe. I don't know. There's also potential. He's like, well, can we fix it? And the doctor says, maybe, but spinal surgery is super, super risky. So in order to justify the risk, I would need to be able to see that you can voluntarily move something, anything, a finger, a toe, anything. And so he leaves with Melanie, and she is shocked because rather than being excited and hopeful, he is just pissed, super angry, aggressively pissed at the doctor. And when he goes home, he tries to call the doctor, I guess to chew his ass, but the doctor is not there. He's off on a trip, and the nurse gives Alan the number where he can be reached, and it's Linda's number. And so Alan calls Linda's number. The doctor picks up. Alan just hangs up, but he's seething in anger.
That's when he bites his lip. Yeah.
Yes, with his big teeth.
And the monkey climbs up on him and licks the blood off. That's
an
interesting scene, right?
And it almost seemed like he was so enraged that he didn't even notice. Like he's just kind of staring off into space. Very strange. But that night, monkey POV shot, we see the monkey go into a cabin where presumably, we just see the legs, but presumably it's Wiseman and Linda having sex, and then we just see flames. And in the morning, Alan's mom gets a phone call, and she's like, oh no, how will I tell Alan? And then Alan wheels himself in, and she says something terrible has happened. There's been, and Alan says, a fire. And so he knows. He has,
because he saw it.
He saw it in his mind, in his dream. So he knows what's going on. So he immediately calls Jeffrey and says, get this monkey out of here. Yeah. I don't know what's going on, but it's bad. She's bringing out something terrible in me. Bad things are happening. Get this monkey out of here.
I mean, it's impressive. He picks up on it right away. He knows what's going on. And I loved this scene. He says, it's ugly, it's vicious, sinful anger. It's a sin. I'm getting a desire to sin, Jeff. And Ellen has picked up on that. And Jeffrey agrees to take her back to the lab. And as he takes her out, Alan says to him, do not bring her back. And the monkey is like screaming.
It was heart-wrenching. He's dragging it out on a leash, and it's trying desperately to stay.
No, it likes
again,
it. Oh God.
Yeah, again, you feel bad for the monkey. The monkey's just doing what it's trying.
Yeah,
it's trying to do what it thinks Alan wants it to do. It's serving him. It doesn't know any better, and then to tear it away. I mean, it just seems really sad. I don't know what happens at this point. He gets it back to the lab. Ella at this point wants more injections.
Yeah, suddenly Ella wants the injections. Didn't want them before, so that's odd.
Also, as soon as the monkey's gone, Melanie starts to comfort Alan, and she's like, "Why don't you stay at my house this weekend?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know." And she's like, "Well, I've got the whole setup in the barn because I train the monkeys there. I think you'll be comfortable."
And I mean, of course, in my head, I'm thinking, this is what we get. Oh, it's going to be a sex scene, isn't it? And in my head, I was thinking, well, I guess she could sit on his face.
I didn't go there. I don't. Well, I mean, the movie does. I didn't immediately go there, but I didn't
please.
know. All he can do is move his head. So when she's adjusting his chair, he kind of nuzzles into her bosom innocently. There's not a whole lot he can do to show affection, and she kind of recoils at first, but then she starts taking off her clothes, and the next thing we see is them in bed.
Look,
and now again, I'm no doctor. I don't know how this works. I don't know if certain parts of the anatomy continue to function, but in this case, it doesn't seem so. But there are other things people can do.
I'm just gonna come right out and say I thought this was hot, and I was really.
It was kind of hot.
I was really impressed, and I was reading in the trivia on IMDb, and apparently this is one of the very few, if not only, portrayals of a quadriplegic having sex on screen, and that's so nice. Thank you, George Romero.
They're still people, right?
Take us into this world and help us understand how people deal with these things and force us to confront them and think about them. And my God, it doesn't seem sad at all. It's quite hot, and she's having a good time.
Supposedly it was initially, it's pretty graphic anyway.
It is.
Supposedly it was initially significantly more graphic, and they ended up cutting it down. I think that funny. The producer wanted it even more graphic, and Romero didn't, and the producer ended up saying he was right. The way that it is good enough.
We don't need to see it's not a porno. We don't need to see everything. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
But so obviously they have this relationship now. He's feeling much better, but eventually Ella escapes and immediately goes back to his house where he's with his mom. Now, it just happens to be a moment where he's trying to apologize to his mother for having been so angry and aggressive. Of course, he can't really explain to her what was going on because I don't think that she would either believe or understand it, but he's trying to apologize. But as soon as Ella's near, he gets immediately aggressive and angry again and recognizes, he's like, oh my God, she's here.
She's here. Yeah.
Call Jeffrey, get somewhere safe. But the mother is just angry and upset, and
she slaps him a bunch of times. It's like,
but it's not unfair. He's being very mean, and I think that his acting is pretty good, except for that his primal rage manifests as Robert De Niro sometimes. He turns into Robert De Niro all of a sudden with the squinty eyes and stuff. But he knows that Ella's there, and so he's screaming to his mom, lock yourself in your room, lock yourself in your room. But instead, she draws herself a bath and is crying in the bath. And Ella throws the plugged in hairdryer in the bath and kills her.
Yeah. I mean, again, suspension of disbelief, but I get it. Okay, the monkey's trying to sort of do what she thinks is right, to take revenge on the people that Alan is angry at. At the same time, how does this monkey know how electricity works?
I don't know.
It bothered me a little bit, but
yeah.
Anyway.
I don't remember. He gets in touch with Jeffrey somehow, and Jeffrey comes over, and Jeffrey's got a couple vials of whatever they use to put animals
poison
down. I don't. Yeah,
poison. Yeah. It's just a chase. Yeah.
It becomes a chase. It's very reminiscent of Pet Sematary with Gage. This little being, kind of outsmarting the grown man, and it's well done. Like it's super well choreographed and staged with the monkey. It's really believable. Some of the direct combat is that whole Chucky kind of like, why can't you fight this little monkey? Like it's much, much smaller than you. Some of that seems a little far-fetched, but mostly it's just about the monkey kind of getting away.
Yeah.
And getting other stuff. And eventually it does. It gets the vial, and it injects Jeffrey.
Yeah, so Jeff is poisoned.
And he's so disoriented by the poison that he doesn't even, Alan is begging him to call the hospital, call the police. He's like, no, I just have to drive myself to the hospital, which obviously he can't. And so he falls over and he's dead. Somehow Alan has been able to dial Melanie. He wasn't able to talk to her, but he was able to dial her, and she heard stuff going on in the background. And so she shows up, and then the monkey is menacing her.
Well, the monkey's smart. This is like vibes of, I don't know, like Misery, like Wait Until Dark. It's like you have a person who is disabled in some way, who against all odds has to confront this devious creature and use its wits to, overcome the physical disability it has, its inability to move, its inability to see, whatever. In his case, he's in a wheelchair that's electric, and all he can do is move his head. And this monkey can go and do whatever he wants. And this monkey's been trained and he knows the house. And so, Alan is like trying to open the front door and he's calling out to his system, number 10 or whatever, which opens the front door. And the monkey just cuts the power and then runs over and closes the door. And he tries to, make a phone call, and the monkey goes over and like bites the phone cord away. And I mean, I was really on the edge of my seat during this whole sequence thinking, how in the hell? I have no idea how this guy's going to get out of this. Like, no idea. The odds are completely stacked against him.
Right. And he does something to Melanie, or the monkey does, excuse me.
Trips her up and she
trips her up or something. And she stands up and says, okay, Alan, was that you or the monkey? Because Alan feels responsible for all this. And he's like, that was her. She did it. And Melanie's like, that's right. It's not you. You're not doing this. It's her. But then she gets knocked out. And the monkey is menacing her with that other syringe.
God. That was creepy as f***.
Rubbing it on her face and near her eyes and stuff.
And her eyes and like trying to figure out how to poke her, but he's on her face. And I don't know, just needles around your eye in general are scary. And
so Alan uses all of his will to move his hand and press play on this cassette player. And Ella likes music, it's like
they have like a thing,
Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday or something, right? They've got, it's kind of their thing, and he entices Ella to come and be affectionate with him, which again is kind of heartbreaking because he has to lure her with kindness and love. And of course we know it's deception, but she doesn't. And she looks at him and she goes up and she starts hugging him and nuzzling him as she has before. And before, it has been so sweet, that there's so little he can do, but he can nuzzle her with his face. And that's what they had done in the past. It was very sweet. This is the part that I remember just because I thought that it was, it's hard to watch, but more than because it's gross or anything like that, just because it's sad. And again, there's only so much that he can do, but what he can do is he can chomp down on her neck and shake her like a dog shakes its prey.
Yeah.
And that's what he does. And it is just, the camera we watch this happen, and it's brutal. It's violent, it's brutal, and you see, I'm sure it's a puppet, but you see it getting flung around violently, and then thrown to the ground. And even the corpse of the monkey falling to the ground looks uncomfortably real. If that was a puppet, Savini did an amazing job because it looked very lifelike as it crumpled on the ground.
Well, of course, the idea of it's just horrifying, right? It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
They had this love, they had this affection. It started out that way. He has to use that love and affection and tap into what she still has for him. And again, she sort of feels like she's helping him all this time, and he takes advantage of that. And it's like an ultimate betrayal kind of thing, but it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have any choice.
Yeah, he didn't have any choice.
And then, that's kind of it. I think the next thing we see is
there's a jump scare. There's a weird thing.
Well, we jump to his surgery. It's very reminiscent of the last time, but the doctor slices into his back, and then the lights flicker, and then Ella pops out from inside him. It was a good jump scare. I had forgotten it, and I didn't see it coming.
It was really good.
But then he, wakes up. And it's post-surgery, and he asks Melanie if it was successful, and then it cuts away, and we see him being wheeled to her van, and when the nurse wheels him up to the van, he stands up and climbs into the van himself, and they drive away into the sunset. And it's a nice, happy ending. The book didn't end as happily. I haven't read the book. I just read about this. The book doesn't end as happily. His surgery is not a success in the book. There was a different ending to the movie that had to do with the dumb, evil scientist, Burbage or whatever. Like, he had been injecting all of the other monkeys with the serum, and he goes to the lab only to find that the monkeys have completely overtaken the lab and are like planning a monkey uprising or something. I don't know. Something stupid.
Well,
but and Romero liked it and wanted to stick with that darker ending, but it tested really, really poorly. Yeah. And he said, to be fair, the studio said, we will release it with whichever ending you choose. If you want to stick with your ending, we'll release it with your ending. If you want to go with the happier ending, we'll do that. So, that's uncommon for a studio to give a director that kind of say. But he ultimately went with the happier ending. And, subsequently, I think he said that he felt like he made the right decision. But it wasn't an easy decision to make. I think it was the right decision.
Yeah.
I liked that, after what was, very sad, I thought that the whole ending with Ella was very sad. You kind of need a little bit of a palate cleanser. And so it worked for me. And overall, I'm so glad, I'm not patting myself on the back. We've talked about doing this for a long time, but I'm glad I picked it because I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't bored. I didn't think it was too long.
It was a good movie. I mean, honestly, it was a good movie.
And I'm happy to remind people of it or introduce people to it, because if you haven't seen it or if you haven't seen it for a long time, go back. I think it stands up.
It does.
In 2022, I think it stands up pretty darn well. It doesn't feel overly dated.
No.
It's good. It's a good story, good characters, empathetic characters, surprising empathy for the monkey and Alan and, lots of people. And just overall, it was a really enjoyable movie to watch.
It accomplishes those things that Romero is quite good at, and that is, tapping into deeper, more emotional truisms kind of about humanity and life and politics or whatever it is, that really never go away. And so even though he's making a horror movie and many times it's quite exploitative or whatever, like there's an underpinning there that gets to you and it works. I felt like the movie was really skillful at hammering the point home and creating these characters that were believable, creating situations that were believable because they were complex. They were not black and white, with the exception of the nurse,
right?
The Dean Burbage. Everybody else in there had complexity and real motivation. You could understand why they were doing what they were doing, and you could understand why they weren't perfect. And I just loads of sympathy for the monkey, sympathy for the main character. Once again, pretty rare to portray disability in a film. We don't usually go down that road, and people usually just use it as a means to an end. But like this, we for a little while kind of get to empathize and experience what this guy's life might be like and what his challenges are and his emotional states. And I found that satisfying and interesting, especially, like in the 80s. There were a lot of little things that really tickled me about this movie, really kept me engaged, kept me on the edge of my seat, and stuck with me at the end. I would totally recommend this movie to others, and good movie. Thank you, Craig. Good choice.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, sometimes you do a good thing every now and then. It's nice.
Yeah, every now and then. Check out this movie if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a long time. It's really good. And if you enjoyed this episode, let us know. You can message us on any of the platforms. You can find us wherever you find your favorite podcast. We do have a Patreon now where we have some extra material if that's something that you are interested in. I believe if you go to our Facebook page, you can find a link to the Patreon page. Message us. Let us know what you thought. Let us know anything that you would like to hear from us moving forward. But until next time, I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
With two guys and a chainsaw.